On today's show, Jurickson Profar, I love you, man.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Tuesday, June 25th. As always, I am your host with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You may be familiar with my baseball-related work over at Just Baseball, which is a great website that everyone should check out. My new podcast over there, Baseball versus the World, on general evergreen topics. That is really fun. And I'm also going to be writing over there about trade deadline targets soon, so look forward to that. You can also, of course, follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, Javiipeno, also at LO_Padres for the Padres account for updates on the show. Folks, I'm so happy right now. I remember my Australian homie, you know who you are, sir, messaged me saying, and I talked about this on the last mailbag, so not this week, not yesterday's, but last week's mailbag, that he was saying, like, I don't care what anyone says, this team is so much more fun to watch, for sure, than last year. I'm like, I do agree. This has been a team that has been, while still frustrating in the overall record department, they've already had, frankly, I even think like a month ago, they already had more really great fun moments, from the comeback against the Cubs to the, frankly, even the opening series against the Dodgers, in which they won that second game. That was really fun. To beating the Dodgers, beating the Braves, and then the, walk-off hit against the Dodgers from Luis Arraez, and then the, Jurickson Profar, Mr. Irrelevant, and, just a bunch of these comebacks, the explosion against the D-backs. They've had so many good moments. The walk-off, the 2 straight walk-offs, 3 straight actually, at home anyway, but the 2 straight walk-offs against the A's, Jackson Merrill, all that stuff. There's been so much positive about this year that if you want to just view it from a perspective of just enjoyment, this year, don't get me wrong, it has been very like polar opposites at time. But what you can't argue is that this team has had more fight and this team has had more great moments than last year's team. And to me, the first thing you got to talk about when it comes to better things than last year is Jurickson Profar. I just want to take a sec. I might spend this whole first segment just talking about Profar. Just a magical season. First of all, just from the statistical standpoint, he's 20th in wins above replacement. If you guys are wondering, wow, that's crazy. How is he only 20th in wins above replacement? It's because of the defense. A lot of guys above him, from guys like Anthony Volpe, Ketel Marte, and whatnot. But when it comes to outfielders, there aren't many that have been better than him, including in the American League as well, with this, obviously some exceptions being Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. And yes, really quickly, yes, Juan Soto has actually been very good defensively this year. So shouts to him. Where was that last year, man? Anyway, that when it comes to offensively, though, Jurickson Profar has been amazing. He's 8th in the league in WRC plus, with a 160 mark, which is incredible. And then in on-base percentage, he is 3rd in the league, only behind Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. And what's been so fun is that this isn't totally a fluke, right? Don't get me wrong. He's had, it should regress to some extent. His weighted on base is 390, while his expected is 368. But bottom line is he's still having a good season, and he's transformed himself. It looks like, whether it comes to the leg kick, getting more power out of his backside, just kind of hitting the ball a lot better. And yes, don't get me wrong, some of this will come down, or at least likely will come down at some point. Bottom line is he has been a very solid player. And even if it was to come down all the way, what Profar has done for this team is unparalleled. Folks, I am in a baseball group chat. I'm in like 7 different baseball group chats. That might shock you, that the guy who does baseball media coverage and whatnot is in a lot of baseball group chats. But I'm literally in so many group chats where no one can find a comparison to what Jurickson Profar is doing this season. And I'm not talking about just the stats in a vacuum. I'm talking about a guy who has been in the league for 10 years and has never done anything like this. At age 31 is figuring things out. And by the way, figuring things out, not lucky, right? Not totally lucky. That's an important factor too. But he's really figuring things out late. And on top of that, you look at a player who the previous year wasn't just like not good. He was the worst qualified player in all of Major League Baseball. Then you take into account they signed him for 1 year, $1 million. Every group chat that I'm in cannot find a comparison. Maybe there are ones from back in the day. I imagine there are ones back in the day, maybe before my time. But when it comes to my time, the only one that people have brought up is R.A. Dickey of the Blue Jays, who, got better and later in his career and had like a Cy Young season at age 35, right? Like he's the closest thing people could think of, but even him, he did not necessarily have like 10 years of failure. You know what I mean? He actually had a couple like okay seasons, but for the most part, he's the closest one, guys. He debuted in the league in 2001, and then he got really good all of a sudden in 2012 when he won his Cy Young Award, right? And then he was pretty okay the year after, or the year before that. But like that's the closest comp we have for Jurickson Profar. So we don't even have a batter; it's a pitcher, and it's been absolutely astounding. Him getting that walk-off hit last night, especially after after walking Luis Arraez intentionally. Which, by the way, let's talk about that really quickly. The Washington Nationals are chumps, straight up. I have been doing this show for 5 years, and I have been consistent from the beginning, including when sometimes Padres players have been mad. Brusdar Graterol against the Padres in the playoffs and Manny Machado getting mad at him is one example. Like, that was stupid, too. Like, Manny deserves blame and should be criticized for that. Baseball players are the softest people on the planet when it comes to, not on the planet, but when it comes to all the major sports, they are so soft. Last night, after the walk-off, what was supposed to be a double, but as Jurickson Profar was quoted after the game, he didn't care that it was only limited to a single because he never rounded second base, and he instead just started celebrating. That after that, or what was I going to say? After that, he's celebrating, he's gesturing towards the crowd, and then all of a sudden we're getting reports that, there's some drama here. The Nationals, they're not leaving. You had Hunter Harvey or whatever outside the dugout, like waiting and staring and whatnot. And my thing was, first of all, it seems like, according to Jurickson Profar himself, he insists that he was celebrating with the fans. And when you watch the replay, that's what it looks like he's doing, for the most part. Does he maybe gesture at the Nationals dugout a little bit? Okay, yeah, but for the most part, he's looking at the fans, getting them pumped up and everything. He loves the fans. He loves San Diego. Clearly, he loves San Diego. He's better here than anywhere else he's ever been in his career, like, combined, right? Like, the vibes are immaculate with this man in San Diego, which is great, especially if you've been following other former Padres that just seem to do well, from Cal Quantrill to Ryan Weathers, to apparently guys who just didn't care about being here. Shouts to Eric Hosmer. You have a moment like that, and it's really great for the fans, and we love it, and it's a big comeback win. By the way, it wasn't just Jurickson Profar. It is worth, we haven't done the full game recap because I'm just talking about Jurickson Profar this season, but it was also some hits from Jackson Merrill as well, and Donovan Solano that helped them come back into it. But he gets the walk-off, so he's celebrating with the crowd. And hot take, even if he was taunting the Nationals dugout, this is what I mean by baseball players being the softest people alive, right? Even if he was, hot take, get over it. Right? They literally walked Luis Arraez, which I'm not saying is like disrespectful in like a mean sense. It's strategy. Like, that's part of the game. But it was disrespectful to fun sports sense. So you guys are allowed to be disrespectful by walking Luis Arraez, who, by the way, I don't know about y'all, but I still would have been a little bit nervous if it was Arraez. He hadn't gotten a hit that night, right? Like, he had one walk and then obviously the intentional walk. He was 0 for 4. So I was like, I don't know if I want to do that, you know what I mean, if I'm the other team. And instead they walked Jurickson Profar, who, by the way, has been good against both lefties and righties this year, so it's not like there was a lefty-righty matchup advantage there. So you walk him, and then he's celebrated because he's like, y'all walked him in order to face me, and look what happened, driving a ball into the gap. So, like, Nationals, get over yourselves. It's ridiculous. You literally walked him. So why can't he celebrate a little bit? Why not? If you don't like it, then strike him out or make him pop up or ground out. But instead you did it, and he made you pay for it. So all Nationals, this stems back all the way to the Rangers days with those softies when they got mad that Tatis swung on 3-0, right? This idea of unwritten rules of baseball, I do think that we've been veering away from it, but I do stand by this is evidence of my theory for a long time that I just think baseball players are extraordinarily soft, and they get mad at anything you do. Same goes for the fans sometimes too. But when it comes to this, I'm like, get out of here, man. So, shouts to Jurickson Profar. There's a old TV series from the late 90s that people probably aren't familiar with. It's actually kind of underrated. It's called Sports Night. It's written by and created by someone you might have heard of, Aaron Sorkin. For those who don't know, this is a guy who's like one of the more talented writers, screenplay writers in Hollywood of the generation. This is a guy who wrote, A Few Good Men. For those who don't know the Jack Nicholson You Can't Handle the Truth, that was him. He's written a bunch of other movies, from The American President to many more that I'm blanking on right now, but he also created and wrote The West Wing, which is a very famous show too. And also The Social Network is probably his magnum opus. He wrote that and he won an Oscar for it. There's this show called Sports Night that came out in the late 90s, and the first episode is actually really interesting because it actually relates to me a lot. It's basically where one of the two main characters, it's basically they host this like late sports show called Sports Night. And one of them is like thinking of quitting. He's like the on-air personality. And he's like, sports don't do it for me anymore. There's all this, there's some corruption, and then there's other bad things in the world. And then you have athletes who are jerks on and off the field. Y'all can relate to that, especially with a certain pitcher who everybody keeps talking about ad nauseum for some reason, because you get a former Cy Young winner on a low contract. So I relate to that part too. But he's talking about, just being a little bit disgruntled with the rest of the sports industry, how we have to cover up other things, and we talk about the fun stuff, even though we ignore how people can be bad, both owners and players alike. And at the end of the episode, what happens is there's this guy, a fictional player, who, like, I forgot what it was, but he had some debilitating injury and hadn't been back in track and field for like 10 years. And he's super old, older than the rest of the competition. And it was viewed as him coming back as just a ceremonial, like just to see if he can do it. And instead, what happens is he starts to win. And he's winning the whole thing. And the episode follows this guy who's disgruntled and wants to quit, being brought back into his love of sports and being like, yes, there's so much bad oftentimes, but then there are these kernels, there are these moments of joy that remind us why we like sports in the first place. And then he calls up his son and he's like, you got to turn this on. This guy's about to, he doesn't just win. I think he breaks like a world record. And obviously that's totally ridiculous, but it's fictitious. But the point is driven home, which is that we have those moments. Jurickson Profar is that moment for me. For as much as occasionally this team, for much as my personal life, which has been weird lately, for much as I do get annoyed with sports, there's a reason why I'm always talking about pop culture, especially on my Twitter. As I've got Pikachu hanging out here, literally on this video, if you're watching the video of the show. But then you have moments like this that bring you back in. And Jurickson Profar's story, as unparalleled as it is exactly what I'm talking about. It's what makes me fall in love with sports and what makes me keep coming back. So even if they don't always win and whatnot, it's worth it because of moments like this. At least that's how I see it. But folks, now that we're done talking about Jurickson Profar, we got to talk about the rest of the game and some takeaways from it, including Matt Waldron having another awesome start. So the only thing I've been right about this year is Matt Waldron. Going to be talking about that, as well as some issues with the Padres bullpen, as well as Yu Darvish and Fernando Tatis Jr.'s injuries. So still plenty to talk about, y'all. Still plenty to talk about. But first, I got to talk to you about, folks, the good folks. The good folks over at Tax Network USA, man. Because look, we pride ourselves on getting you all the latest news for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, the playoffs, spring training, whatever it is. It's year round, just like tax collection season, because just because this tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. Don't let it happen, man. Don't let the IRS target you. You don't want that. So let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. Get it? See that pun there? With over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. That's a lot of money, folks. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, given your personal circumstances, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/locked-on. See the link in the description below for more info. Go check that out. But folks, we're not done yet. We got another sponsor for the show as well, Supply House. We've been talking about them a lot recently because it's something that I could use too. I'm not a handyman. Well, guess what? Supply House, they are the people that help you for all the skilled trades. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands. That's so nuts. And get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. And if you need help, because, hey, I'm talking about it. I'm a Dumbo with this stuff. Well, they have industry-leading experts and service from the friendliest folks in the business, and you get to talk to a person for real every time. So go check that out, guys. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program as well. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at SupplyHouse.com. Go check it out. And just like that, we're back, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Locked On Padres podcast, thriving and vibing as always. Finally making the second segment. We took a long time talking about Jurickson Profar. Let's talk about the dang game, man. Let's do it. Let's talk about this. Firstly, let's start with Matt Waldron, who is excellent yet again in this game and continues to be one of the only things that I was right about this year. Shouts to him. 6 innings, 2 earned runs on 5 hits, 2 walks, 8 strikeouts, which is the most I think he's had in quite some time, by the way. Excellent start for our guy. Man, this guy has been such a story and a sensation lately, and it's just been incredible to watch. One from just like, famously Patrick Mahomes, shouting him out recently, saying that he's trying to throw the knuckleball and whatnot. Most strikeouts that he's had in a start since the May 28th game against the Marlins, in which he had 8, and then prior to that was 10 strikeouts against Atlanta. He has not given up more than 2 earned runs since a start against... I want y'all to guess who. It was the start that I defended and saying that bloated his ERA. The Arizona Diamondbacks start. That's how long ago it was. May 5th was the last time this guy gave up more than 2 earned runs. That's how much of a hot stretch he's been on. And I don't think it's totally fluky. Not to mention, his FIP is pretty good. His xFIP, all that stuff, expected ERA. I think what's really carrying Matt Waldron is not just the knuckleball, which was awesome last night for the record. He got 7 whiffs on 18 swings. The horizontal movement was actually a little bit better than usual from it as well, which was great. About 3 inches better. Just really good stuff from him, but also it's his secondary pitches. His sweeper he had 5 whiffs on last night, and his four-seam fastball he had 3. Just getting a little bit more from those secondaries, especially the sweeper, is what I think has made him better, and is what will potentially continue to make him better, because the knuckleball, while it is great, it's not impossible that this thing is a novelty. I mean, that's been the thing for a while. That's why people don't really throw the knuckleball anymore. Speaking of R.A. Dickey in the last segment, but the fact that he's improving the rest of his repertoire is such a good sign. He's been one of the most exciting success stories in Padres pitching development in quite some time, because for the most part, he was relatively out of nowhere and unknown and a little bit of a nobody heading into this year. There was one point when I kept calling him Michael Waldron because I'm such a Marvel head, and he was one of the writers for a lot of Marvel projects, that I kept getting his name wrong by accident on this podcast. So I apologize for that, but not anymore. So Matt Waldron's been great. Is he an all-star? Maybe. I think that when it comes to the numbers, first of all, and if you go by wins above replacement, which I don't always like to do for pitchers, he's 11th in baseball, which is pretty good. Or I'm sorry, he's 11th in the National League specifically. All right, with a 1.9 wins above replacement mark, tied with Hunter Green of the Cincinnati Reds. His strikeout rate isn't better, but it's better than some guys like Christopher Sanchez and Logan Webb, although those guys are both very good, especially Webb. I don't think he's going to be an all-star based necessarily entirely on merit. But what I do think is it would be really cool to have him there, only because, one, he's had such this amazing run streak, as I've talked about, since, what was that, May 5th, he hasn't given up more than 2 earned runs. But also just like, who else is throwing knuckleballs, man? Who doesn't want to see that in the All-Star game? I understand that based on merit, there are other guys that are going to go first, but just from a selfish standpoint and maybe a biased standpoint, I really do think that it would be cool if we could have him in the All-Star game, only because it's like, hey, that knuckleball is awesome. Who doesn't want to see that? That's new. That's fresh. You've seen your Chris Sale and what's it called? Mackenzie Gore type seasons before. Yeah, I know. By the way, guys, Mackenzie Gore's been great. You've seen guys like that. You've seen Max Fried. It's not as exciting. Ranger Suarez, whatever, man. I think that Matt Waldron would be a very fun All-Star. So shouts to him. Another great start. Unfortunately, no, it's not all positives for the Padres, and I do think they deserve some criticism. Patrick Corbin, who they do get to early in this game, which is good. Bottom of the second inning, Ha-Seong Kim gets a single, and then Kyle Higashioka rips a double. Shouts to him making up for the absence of Luis Campusano. But then after that, they go dead quiet for the longest time. In fact, that they go dead quiet until the bottom of the dang third inning, which is just really embarrassing for the Padres. At one point, Patrick Corbin retires 10 straight batters. Patrick Corbin, as we talked about on yesterday's episode, one of the worst pitchers in baseball, especially when you just look at overall over like the last 4 or 5 years. He's been dreadful. For you to let him go 7, which he hasn't done in a while, and for you to let him at one point retire 10 straight batters, that's embarrassing. 7 innings, 3 earned runs on 5 hits, no walks, 5 Ks. That's a really bad moment for the Padres offense. I'm not super mad at them. They've still been good overall this year. But I'm more mad at what it says about the team and the vibe of the Padres, which is always, we find new ways to lose, and we will make bad teams, bad players in this particular case, look better than they actually are. So not a great showing from the Padres offense for the most part. But then, of course, they make up for it later. But before that, before they get into the bottom of the 12th inning, Enyel De Los Santos, man, and Adrian Morejon. Morejon gives up 1 earned run on 3 hits. Not great for him. I've always talked about how, like, he does worry me a bit. You know what I mean? He just has this vibe that you don't trust him, even though all the stuff is good. He's one of those dudes that just doesn't have it fully yet in terms of confidence. But in terms of just his overall performance, he's still 2.43 ERA. He's still been one of the better relievers out of this bullpen. Jeremiah Estrada, he goes an inning, doesn't give up anything. Thank God. I tweeted this too. Like, finally, a Jeremiah Estrada performance that didn't make my soul feel like it was about to leave my body because he's been dreadful lately. Robert Suarez comes in, only allows a hit, nothing else. But then Enyel De Los Santos in the top of the 10th inning gets absolutely demolished. Gets 2 outs, gives up 2 earned runs, 3 overall. I was defending Santos. I think that I might have to hop off the bandwagon. He's been really bad lately, and it's just not something you like to see. And it stinks because we almost wasted a good start from Matt Waldron, which, by the way, I forgot to mention, he gave up 2 runs. One of them was like a dumb dribbler that happened that was like, like down the third base line from, I think, Joey Meneses. Like, think about that too. It was also a dumb earned run that they got. But Santos, maybe I'm wrong about this guy. I really did think that he did what he did. But he has not been very good for a while now. He looks extremely mediocre, and I am worried about him. And in general, I'm worried about this Padres bullpen. I do think that that's what Preller is looking to improve. If anything, that's probably his biggest sign that he wants to improve. But pitching is a big problem for this Padres team, almost across the board. They're not quite DEFCON 4 or 1. They're not top of the list, like nuclear alarm type of thing bad, but they have been really bad to the point where it's like, I don't know how it's going to get better, I think is the important part. Because while, yes, you have Darvish and Musgrove on the IL, we don't know when they're going to come back, by the way. We're going to talk about them in a second. It's just been really rough for them so far this season. And then when you look at this Padres team as a whole, the fact that they're just we're so used to seeing them find ways to lose, the bullpen has been a major reason for that. So not great for them, but of course they end up winning. And we're going to conclude that in just a second, guys, and talk about Darvish and Tatis being on the IL in just 1 second. But first, I want to take 1 minute to talk to you about one of our favorite sponsors, one of our classic sponsors, folks, and that is the legendary, the phenomenal Prize Picks. Folks, here's the thing. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. We just love to see it. We love to see it. You absolutely love to see it, folks. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you have to do is just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in, get in on the daily action with your friends, and become part of the Prize Picks community today. They've got all sorts of promotions too. If you're looking for that, they've got you covered every week, from lowering select player stats projections on Tuesdays to help your lineup, which is today, or getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. They've got all sorts of stuff. And with finals over, you could obviously do your baseball picks. Maybe you want to pick over on Jackson Merrill and whatnot tomorrow. You've also got WNBA stuff going on right now. Women's basketball is still heating up with stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese to make names for themselves alongside greats like Brianna Stewart and Asia Wilson. You can win up to 100 times your cash watching them ball out, watching everyone ball out. NHL's done. Football will come up soon, but right now it's baseball, WNBA, and then maybe something else. Is NASCAR on? Golf? I don't know, but whatever. Prize Picks is here for you, and what I love about them as well is they have some nice injury insurance. So, for example, if you pick Tatis the day that he got hit and left the game, it was only one at bat. So guess what? It doesn't count as a loss. So that's really cool too. It's just a nice little bonus. You know what I mean? Nice little bonus. We love that. We love that here at Locked On Padres, and I know that you love it because Prize Picks is the best. Go check it out. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB after you download the app for a first deposit match up to $100. $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we are back in the waning moments here. In the waning moments of this here Locked On Padres podcast. We are thriving and certainly vibing. Man, what a moment. What a moment for this team. Yesterday, after Enyel De Los Santos gives up that huge home run, by the way, which I kind of want to just forget. I really do, because I've been defending Santos, but that was dreadful to give up those runs. Man, what happens? What happens? Well, for some reason, my phone isn't loading the play-by-play, but basically, and by the way, I don't understand. I'm going to get on this real quickly, but the zombie ghost runner thing, I see people complaining about that way too much for baseball fans, and I just want to say once again, to give you some perspective, the Padres were 2-14 in extra innings games last year. They played 16 games in extra innings. They have 162 games, guys, in a season. So given any given team, you are complaining about something that will happen to your team maybe less than 20 times at most, less than 20 times, right? Think about that for a second. You've got 162 games. So everyone who's complaining about it, relax. If anything, I think it makes it interesting because it means you might get walk-offs or tie games, and it might be a little bit more fun seeing trading blows. You got to run around base. I just think it gives you more action, and I think that's more exciting. And it might make you tune into games that you would otherwise wouldn't have cared about. I know it's made me tune in. Whenever I see an extra innings game, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I want to see what happens. But anyway, in this one, Donovan Solano starts off with a double. I had been talking about how he'd been on a little bit of a slow patch lately, but he's still been amazing. Another guy, just like Jurickson Profar, except not without all the lore of prior seasons, but another guy that the Padres just seemingly picked up off the scrap heap. So that's really great. He gets a double, and then Jackson Merrill with second and third. He gets a big single in this one. Merrill has been tremendous, obviously, for a while. He's been moved up in the lineup order. 1 for 4 on the night, but does have that lovely 2-run RBI single. And then, of course, the rest is history, as after that, you get Ha-Seong Kim drawing a walk. Tyler Wade sacrifices, moving Ha-Seong Kim and Jackson Merrill to second and third, respectively. David Peralta popped out. That's one thing that's worth mentioning, by the way. Peralta might be, I don't know. It's just not happening. He looks bad. That was a bad at-bat. He was frustrated with himself. 3 straight strikes and a weak swing that has a weak pop-up to, was it Jesse Winker? I forgot who it was. That was really rough. Peralta really hasn't done anything. I understand, look, they've got a lot of injuries. There's not much you can do right now, but I'm hoping that there's got to be someone, right? There's got to be something that they can do. We'll have to see. But that Tatis injury is going to contribute to that, unfortunately, but we'll see. I personally would rather let's give Bryce Johnson a chance. Why not? Let's just see what happens, I guess, if we bring him in. I don't know, but hopefully the Padres will figure that out. Some really annoying injuries. And then, of course, the Profar walk-off happens, just as we all have been celebrating and talking about on this episode. What a game. What a game. Last thing we got to talk about really quickly, though, is Fernando Tatis Jr. being on the IL along with our guy, Yu Darvish. To me, the Yu Darvish thing was even more frustrating because he was scheduled that his next start was going to be in the major leagues, but unfortunately, he's remaining on the injured list because of elbow inflammation. This is why the Padres, here's the thing. I still stand by my belief that this team has not shown me, as a team overall, that it's worth completely torpedoing the farm again in order to get stuff at a trade deadline that, by the way, is shrinking and shrinking the market. I just don't know if I see enough players, but we'll see. We'll see. Maybe they're okay. I'm just not super high on the idea of trading top-level prospects for Garrett Crochet. I'm just not. We'll have to see how it goes. And frankly, I feel like he might be the only one on the market. I don't know. Maybe they should trade for Ryan Weathers, who apparently is good now. I think that's how I approach this. But I will say, at least if they did a bunch of trades this year, unlike last year, which is good that they didn't do it. Last year, it's not like they had much that they could change. It was like, well, you're getting Blake Snell, Cy Young. Joe Musgrove's been awesome. Yeah, Yu Darvish has been shaky, but the rest of this rotation has been pretty solid. You had Michael Wacha and Seth Lugo all performing pretty well too. That just no one's performing. There wasn't a lot of injuries or anything like that. This year, it's injuries and non-performance too. So I think that at least if they are going to do something at the deadline, at least there's clearly a lot of things that they have to address, from starting pitching to high leverage relievers. Really, they're just dying for that stuff, and maybe even catching, maybe. Right, the Luis Campusano thing is really scary, and I don't know how that's going to age unless he gets better significantly somehow, and they tinker with his swing a bit or his defense as the season goes along. But that's really rough, and obviously Tatis going on the IL. Reports say, first of all, he was diagnosed with a stress reaction in his right leg, an injury that could sideline the team's most dynamic player until late in the summer. Yeah, that's a little scary. We'll see. We have to see how this plays out. They said that in the alerts that I got, they were like, look, he's probably not, they want to put him on the IL because although they think that he was available and that they could have brought him in if they wanted to, they just wanted to play it safe. And they absolutely should, in my opinion. We can't take a chance that Tatis gets super injured, especially given the fact that we don't know exactly what we're getting out of Manny Machado. And even when Xander Bogaerts comes back, whenever that might be, maybe in July, we don't know what we're getting out of him either. So it's not like this team has plenty of stars to count on, right? Apparently the stars on this team are Jackson Barrow, Jurickson Profar, Jake Cronenworth now. That's just where we're at. But overall, I think that's a pretty good decision. So we're going to have to see. We'll play it by ear, and we'll see how this develops. But it is a brutal injury, obviously, for the Padres. Hopefully it's not too long after the All-Star break, right? Hopefully that's kind of what they're looking at. Maybe they're going to say maybe after the All-Star break, we can bring him back, start ramping him up. But it's tough, man. This is a team that is going through a lot of injuries. And if there was one thing about last year's team that, in my opinion, was a bad sign for this team's success, this 2024 team's success, and stick with me on this, they had amazing injury luck last year. Basically no injuries. Yes, Xander Bogaerts got the wrist thing, but for the most part, he was still playing, first of all. And second, they basically didn't have too many injuries all year. Manny Machado had a brief IL stint, but other than that, they were super healthy. And usually, when you have that much good health working in your favor, that's not necessarily a good sign for the year after. So I think that was a point that I think I brought up this prior to the season, which was you had all those good performances from Soto and Snell and whatnot and Hader, all these things, and the fact that you still didn't make the playoffs and you had good injury luck just shows you, again, cannot be understated how last year was like the biggest choke job of an MLB season I've personally ever been alive for. Just cannot be emphasized enough. So this year, they're not having as much injury luck. And in fact, it makes sense because Darvish is really old, right? Darvish is super old. The Musgrove thing is frustrating, but we'll see how it ages. I'm hoping that the Darvish thing isn't too much of a big deal, but we're going to see. I wouldn't be surprised if the team maybe panics and calls up your Robbie Snellings, right? Like, I would not be super surprised if that happened. I wouldn't. We'll have to see how it plans out. Hopefully they can get some good performances from Randy Vasquez as this kind of keeps going on, because I don't know what to expect with the health of Darvish anymore, and I certainly don't know what to expect with Joe Musgrove. So we'll see. All in all, this is a beat-up team, but as I talked about at the beginning of this episode, at least there's a lot to glean in terms of the positive from this season. But folks, with that all being said, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. Feel free to follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO. I'm realizing on the YouTube, I forgot to put up that graphic for the longest time. Go check that out on Twitter. And until next time, stay safe, and of course, stay faithful, my fire faithful homies. Take care.